Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the annual budget hearing continuation for the fiscal year 25-26 budget. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will begin this evening with public audience. We'll ask people to come. If possible, to limit your comments to the budget or financial issues before the town, and if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes. If anyone feels they need more than 3 minutes, we will come back to you after everyone has had an opportunity to speak. So with that, is there anyone who would like to speak? Joe?
Might as well start it off.
If you could state your name and
My address. Or my income? No.
No, that we can do with that. But you can tell us about your trip.
Joan Code 26 Whitcomb Drive. The budget is presented with a 2.55% increase has a devastating effect on the economic growth of Simsbury. There are many unintended consequences, one of which is the encumbrances of the purchase of a building for special education that will service a minute sector of our student population. It appears that the contract to purchase the building for special education has not been signed. The Board of Education should be in the business of delivering cost-effective services to most of our students and not continue to service a special education dynasty that has grown over the years with uncontrolled costs and a dysfunctional plan that is no longer acceptable. The theory that throwing money at a project will fix the problem without any cost containment is a broken model. Our educators do not have the courage to admit that drastic changes must be made and have parents as the stakeholders in paying for the services of their children's special education needs. The educators do not have the courage to go against the special education dynasty, afraid of backlash that will affect their job security with high-paying salaries. The taxpayers are being used as pawns in creating a mirage that money will change the outcomes of student behavior. Increased taxation will create more unintended consequences. Rents will increase, buying power will be diminished, affecting the business community. Economic development will be at a standstill, leading to burdening the residents with higher taxes for diminished services. Hoffman dealership, Diner Nobel, and Ensign Bickford Plant and other high rollers will have the means to appeal their taxes in court and have a reduced settlement, adding to increased costs to the less fortunate. Property values will decrease, leading to lower collection of taxes with a bloated budget that is out of control and unsustainable. All 401k pension plans subject to market volatility has decreased. Listening to this mantra, spend to save, is a failed financial policy. The budget as presented should be voted down until the leaders start showing some integrity in what they are proposing and produce cost controls for unfunded mandates. Just because everyone is doing it, or we have always done it this way, is not a reason to subject the taxpayers to increased taxes without any cost controls in this budget and future budgets. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch and Twitter at Joan Co. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Joe. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
It's the first time I've been here. I will speak, second time here. My name is Margaret Rudin. I live at 5 Cricket Lane. My taxes went up 36% since all of this, despite even also going to the assessment appeals. So it makes me really think about where my money is going. 21% of our population is 65 and over. 22% is less than 18 years. When you presented the budget, it's like, what are we getting for it? So what are seniors, in a sense, getting for the budget? I believe the school education budget is $88 million. I thought it was a 3.91% increase in our budget. The COLA is 2.5, the CPI is 2.95, and we're running at a 3.91 budget increase. I think we need to rethink it. I think that seniors really need to be pulled into the community more and integrated with our students as much as possible. I do see the special education building and I have significant concerns. And also even as a resident, how do I find out about these things? On February 14th, it was shown on the website that the building was going to be considered. On February 18th, there was a hearing, and on February 21st, I believe it was approved to purchase. That's a really limited amount of information for residents to understand. At one of the meetings, one of the residents said, "What about a newsletter?" Referred us to the website. I go to the website. I can navigate websites, but it's a little bit cumbersome really trying to find the breakdown of all of the different aspects of our budget. The special education building would serve 20 to 25 students from elementary, middle, and high school. That's a significant brush stroke of students that would require a significant amount of staffing. You have a psychiatrist scheduled for it. Your least restrictive environment would also be for a seclusion room, perhaps restraints. If you're going to have people with significant challenges that they're going to be on psychiatric meds, you have to also look at what the behavioral interventions will be. What will that impact be on your security, your staff, your workers' compensation? I think it really needs to be rethought. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Just in the nick of time. Hi, I'm Lori Boyko from 15 Oakhurst Road. Just 10 years ago, in 2015, the entire budget of the town, including the Board of Ed, was $85 million. That's several million dollars less than the school budget alone today. At that time, the Board of Ed budget was $66.5 million, almost $20 million less than it is today. That's a 30% school budget increase in just 10 years. And 30% of 66 million is a heck of a lot smaller than 30% of today's 80-something million Board of Ed budget. I can't imagine what it's going to be in the future. I don't even want to look back 20 years. It's no wonder our taxes are like a runaway freight train. This is not affordable for anyone other than the wealthiest in town. We currently have one certified school staff member for every 10 students and one overall staff member for every 6 students. Between 2021 and 2025, enrollment increased by 32 students, while staff increased almost 23. We've added one staff member for every 1.39 students. That's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. Are students receiving more exceptional education? No. The added staff weren't even teachers. They were psychologists and social workers, educational support specialists, paras, 2 capstone positions, and 3.6 department supervisors. This is crazy. Where does it end? When do we say we can't afford this? Because we is all of us. There is not some magic government pot of gold. Whether we borrow it, pay for it with reserves, which are just excess taxes we already paid, or we increase the mill rate, it is money we earn every day that we're forced to dig in our pockets for. When is enough enough? What is the metric that you've squeezed us for more than we have? When is now? It is time to vote resoundingly no on this outrageous spending. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? You'd say we could do seconds, so if you wanna come out.
Do I have to go back up?
Yes.
I think we just want to add one more thing about special education. I don't really see it as a revenue generator. If you look at the Field of Dreams, Build It and They Will Come, parents will come to Simsbury if you have special education services. I don't know how you'll do gatekeeping to decide between the 20 and 25 students that will be allowed to be in there versus bringing students from other areas in order to generate revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. there anyone else who'd like to speak? So while we don't address individuals, I will address a couple of things. The purchase of the property was reviewed at the Board of Selectmen level, the Board of Education level, the Board of Finance level. There were 2 news articles published on it. We did notice the hearing in the Hartford Current as a public notice. It was in the first Selectmen's report and the town manager's report. So we did do, it was in Simsbury Patch as well. So we did do, I think, everything we could have done to get that word out. I agree with the lack of local newspapers. It is difficult sometimes to communicate news. But that was there. For those who are interested in special education, I really encourage you to watch some of the previous Board of Education presentations. The one that was presented to us by our finance director on the finances behind it. And the substance of it was done by Katie Krusula. Did I say that right? Head of special education, really walks through the specifics, and those are about 45-minute presentations, so it's worth looking at. The other thing I want to give, this board does not delve into the specifics of the other boards, we're sort of the finance, but those questions can be appropriately addressed to the Board of Education. They have public audience in both the beginning and the end of their meetings. So that's another avenue you have. And also you can just pick up the phone and call the chair or the superintendent. They're very accessible. They're here tonight. You can talk to them anytime, and I encourage you to do so. In terms of, let me see. And part of that presentation by our finance director was on the revenue capacity and sort of the spend to save analysis, and it was done very deep. We had our 2 actuaries probe some of the assumptions on it as well. So there is a lot of information out there. We did hear from members of the public, and I just wanted to see if Mark or Matt or Jeff or Wendy had anything they wanted to add at this point, in addition to what I just said.
Chair, I would just like to thank all of the town staff and this board, and the Board of Education, as well as the Board of Selectmen. And again, as I indicated in, I think our first public meeting, our work on the budget this year started early. Actually, I think as early as November 15th or thereabouts. And a lot of effort on the part of a lot of folks, and your board, I think, made it. Certainly it was a challenging budget, as we all know. But I just want to thank everybody for their work and effort, and remind the public that in terms of our CIP, we were at $3.5 million or something, well under the guidance level, and we've really done what we could, I think both on the education side and the municipal side to tighten our belts this year. Relative to our peers, we're making a little progress, as you know, with respect to the effective tax rate. So just a thank you to everybody involved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. One of the things I'll just add, generally all towns in Connecticut are facing a cost shift. The state is shifting a lot of costs from their budgets down to the towns. We're seeing that particularly in special education, unfunded mandates that we are forced to absorb the cost for. So it's not particular just to Simsbury, but this is a tremendous trend. Our elected officials, Wendy, and we've got Heather and Steve, I've got Kevin, Curtis, I've got the Board of Selectmen, Jeff, are all working with our elected representatives at the state level to try and push back on some of those mandates. If they think it's valuable at the state level, pay it at the state level. Don't put it onto the property tax, which to Lori's point is already bearing too big a burden. We are now starting to see shifts from the federal government to municipalities. So this will continue to be a challenge. So within that context, and we are also, with the tariffs, we may see increased inflation on costs in addition to the inflation we're already seeing. So within that context, to come in at the Social Security COLA, I think I do want to recognize the efforts of the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen and this board. Our finance director, Melissa Appleby, we've got also Tom Fitzgerald, superintendent and town manager, who worked very hard to get us there. We started this process anticipating a 6.9% tax increase. That took tremendous amount of work to whittle it down. It was a combination of cost savings. We used some capital reserves to offset a temporary spike in debt service. We did get a little extra state money, but it was a matter of literally cutting 5% 5,000 here, 5,000 there. The Board of Selectmen went through their line item, we're making 5,000 cuts. So I do wanna recognize the efforts. Of course, we'd like to be at zero. And we do recognize that some members of the public do see higher tax increases due to the revaluation. For them, it's particularly hard, and I know every member of this board is acutely aware of that. Mr. Nelson has indicated that there is some economic development that may come. We're anticipating a little bit of help next year, and hopefully the year after that will continue, but with construction costs going up because of the tariffs, where that will land, I don't know. So we are entering a difficult time. This is just the first step. Next year is gonna be also a very particularly hard year, and we will start preparing for that tomorrow because we know that is coming. All right, so with that, I wanna give members of my board, before we do anything, I forgot, did a terrible job. May I have a motion to amend the agenda to approve the draft annual report to follow possible budget action discussion?
So moved. And seconded.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously. With that, we will close, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Before we get to budget discussion, we always do a quick review, not so quick, actually a rather in-depth review of the quarterly budget status, because sometimes things come to light at the very last minute, or we see trends that need to be accommodated for in the budget. So Amy did a fairly extensive analysis of that, and I'll ask her to walk us through it. For those members of the public who would like to see it, it is listed under Board of Finance agendas. We list the whole report, and you can follow along if that's of interest to you. But Amy, why don't you walk us through what we have and sort of talk about, why don't you start with what we're probably most interested in, year-end projections, and then walk us through the specifics.
So we are anticipating a year-end surplus again this year. So some good news on that front. Starting off with the revenues, which makes up the majority of our surplus, we are anticipating a surplus in revenues of about 2.3 million. So I will take you through the majority of what makes that up. Under the general government section of department, if you will, of the revenue section, we're receiving an extra $30,000 related to our telecommunications personal property tax from Frontier. Moving down to the town clerk. Here I am projecting about a loss of about $100,000 from conveyance tax payments. So last year in April, there was actually a large conveyance tax of about $142,000. So there is still time to get those larger payments in the spring as the house sales start to boom in the spring market. But right now, based on current trend, it's coming in under budget. On the tax department, anticipated to come in excess of budget about 1.3 million. So this is more of the same that was reported out at the last quarterly. We have our tax collection rate at 98.5%. We actually collect about 99%, so that's about $770,000 in additional revenue. And then on top of that, we had planned for a decrease in our motor vehicle values coming out of COVID, since the values spiked during COVID. And our supplemental motor vehicle actually came in at an increase of about $600,000, giving us about 1.3 million in excess revenues related to tax. Under the finance department, anticipating $690,000 of excess revenues. So we had budgeted a conservative interest revenue at 4.25%. However, at the beginning of the fiscal year, we were able to invest in some CDs, and the interest rate was at a higher, about 4.5% through the third quarter. Interest rates are starting to come down now, but we were able to capture those savings over budget at the beginning of the year. The building department, anticipating about $500,000 in excess of revenues from our spring permit collections. This estimate came from our planning director, who is aware of the permits coming down the line for spring projects. The last major one is Board of Education. So for, I believe it's the third year in a row, we are seeing increased tuition from Heartland students that are being tuitioned into our district and paying the Board of Education's per pupil tuition revenue amount. So that trend is continuing from prior years, giving us about $130,000 in excess revenue. So all of this makes up about our 2.3 million in excess revenues compared to budget.
Amy, 2.3 million sounds like a lot to me, but on a budget of 122, that's under 2%.
Right. Any questions on revenues? Moving on to expenditure projections.
Before we move on, so on the tax collection assumption, which I know we do every year for very good reasons, but refresh my recollection, last year I thought they were down.
We had about 100,000 last year
Yes.
because it includes more than the tax collection assumption.
Right, so there's also some prior year tax collections included in there. There's our interest and liens that are included in there. I don't remember off the top of my head the reasoning from last year, but it was less. It ranges.
You got lucky this year.
Well, actually, this is probably more of a typical year. Around that 700. Last year was an outlier at the 100,000.
We've had an outlier at 100, we've had an outlier over $1 million one year, it was very favorable, but it's highly volatile.
Yeah.
Hey, Amy, really quickly, on the students that are out of town that come to Simsbury schools, was that overage because there's more students coming, or is it because the charge back is more?
Both. So we do increase our tuition every year based on our per pupil, and I believe we might have added 1 or 2 students from the prior year.
Okay, and we're charging them like an average per pupil cost?
We're charging them our per pupil cost, so. Anything else? Moving on to expenditures. So in your packet, you have the individual line items. You will see that there is a lot of more of the same, that the savings are mainly due to salary savings in individual departments due to vacancies and turnover. So instead of going through each of those individual departments and saying the same thing, down at the bottom, we're showing that we will be below budget.
Page number please.
6. We will be below budget by $100,000 between the town and the Board of Education. On the town side, our surplus is actually around $526,000, which is all of the, without the Board of Ed, it's 526, which is the town surplus, and all of this is related to salary savings in the individual line items. And then if you go to the Board of Education line item, this $500,000 surplus is offset by an expected overage in the Board of Education budget related to our special education expenditures. So last time we had reported out that we were anticipating, I think, a $600,000 loss. We had an increase in our special education tuition and transportation, which has been an ongoing theme year over year. And then we had some electricity increases due to the skyrocketing electric rates. There was some staffing changes during the year in our facilities department, which I think will offset the increase in the electricity, that we can count on those savings as those positions had turnover. And then, so this basically leaves us with our anticipated tuition and transportation, special education overage, which is going to end up being around $400,000. I think this is a worst case scenario. It may end up coming in lower than that. But as a worst case scenario for the purpose of tonight, I did put the $424,000. So between the town savings of the $500,000 and the deficit of the Board of Education, that's $100,000 to the good on the expenditure side for the general fund.
We did get an additional Board of Education ECS for $450. Does that include that in your projections?
That's on the revenue side,
I didn't see that in the revenue.
but I don't think the $450 is for '25.
Next year.
It's for '26.
It was not to make whole the last year.
That's for excess cost.
That's what I meant.
Oh, so
sorry.
yes, that is built into the 424, yes.
And the non-lapsing fund will be able to accommodate that.
Yes, so that was my next point. So if you look at the 101,000, this offsets the 400,000 at the discretion of the Board of Education. They will likely utilize the non-lapsing fund to cover this 424,000. So then this becomes the $500,000 surplus. So your overall surplus of the 2.4 will go up by that 400,000. So you're probably about just shy of 3 million in overall surplus between the revenues and the expenditures. Any questions on the?
Questions on that? When I looked at the savings, it looks like most of the savings were at police, library, and parks and rec. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And where are we in terms of filling those positions?
Slow walking them, I think, Chair, would be the phrase I'd use. Except for the police position.
Are there other questions on expenditures at this point? Why don't we move on to capital? Is there anything else you wanted to add on expenditures, Amy?
You wanted to do capital?
I skipped over sewer and you want us to go just in order, anything of note in sewer and Simsbury Farms?
No, nothing of note in those. I didn't know if you wanted me to go through the health insurance fund.
Yeah, let's do that since that's gonna be a topic tonight, that would be great, thank you.
So the health insurance fund, you have a replacement page at your dais for the health insurance fund. This is why you don't work while you're on vacation, because I have no idea where one of those numbers came from when I was reviewing it, so I gave you a corrected copy at your place. That bigger. So premiums revenues expected to come in excess of about 96,000 compared to budget. So a good position to be in on the revenue side, and then a slight deficit on the expenditure side for about 40,000. So your total revenue is about 17,980. Subtract out your total expenditures of 17,940. It'd be a slight surplus of about $40,000 in the health insurance fund. And what we really want to look at is our reserve levels. So this is our beginning fund balance. If we take the anticipated increase of the $40,000, our fund balance is about 4.3. And then we have some claims incurred but not reported, which is part of our reserve levels. That gets us to our total reserves of 5.3 million. And then that is 34% of expected claims. And as I always say, the locked in our benefits advisors would like us to be at 20 to 25% of expected claims. And so the planning that we did for the fiscal year 26 budget to utilize these reserves is intact based on these projections.
And Lockton also says if we use those reserves to use a third of it above the, not to deplete the whole reserves, is that correct?
Right.
Can I ask an ignorant question? Why is the amount of incurred but not reported claims added to the surplus rather than subtracted from it?
Because we record it as a liability, so that money is just sitting there as already paid, so it's already part of our reserves.
That was a question.
I was about to say, no, Bert cannot ask a stupid question.
I don't think he's capable of
That's
that.
exactly my point.
Well, let me know when I ask it back.
Alright. Continuing on then.
So if you wanted to move on to capital, I didn't have anything specific on capital. There is one note of on page 41 for the multi-use trail, it's showing a negative balance. But there is money due from the town of Bloomfield to cover that negative balance as their portion of the project. I didn't know if anybody had any other questions that I can either follow up with the department head or project manager on, or if there's specific questions on any other CNR projects.
So we have a bunch of uncommitted left, totaling almost 4 million that we've approved, but we haven't committed, so just, Mark, can you talk about sort of how we manage that and make sure that we're able to spend what we're approving?
I think how we manage it today is probably a little bit more bit different than how it was managed in the past. We're, as you know, this summer going through all of our capital with a deep dive, and so some of this money would be returned and not spent. Hopefully, that's kind of the in our drawer
You're speaking my language.
over the summer, right? I don't wanna over promise and under deliver, but I think that's where the rubber will meet the road as we go through all of the things that are capital and really get into the strategic plan. As this board knows, the Board of Education is starting its strategic plan, or that's underway, and the superintendent can speak to that. But I think all of us working together, we can bring that sponge and save some significant money on the capital side.
Or reprioritize it towards
And
things.
reprioritize, I think, one of the things we wrestle with is if you defer a project, the cost is going up. And I mean, that's and so how we make those decisions together over the summer is gonna be, I think, very informative about what the year ahead looks like and in fact for the next 4 or 5 years. It's a lot of work, but we're looking forward to that.
Thank you, we appreciate you taking that deep dive.
I don't know if Matt, you wanna add anything on the
No,
capital?
I mean, you mentioned this strategic plan, that's definitely a focus of our Board of Education to kind of take that long range look, reprioritize, really consider, there's, as we all know, a multitude of needs.
Right.
There's kind of needs that feel even beyond the realm of prioritization because they've been labeled as so urgent. So how do we look at those things and make decisions about that level before we make other decisions? So there is a lot of work to be done there.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I think everyone's really taken a good look at the capital, and so I think we all sort of understand the challenges, and given the state and federal climate, it's going to be made all the more difficult. So we do appreciate the effort and the look that you all are taking on that. Are there any other questions on capital at this point? Amy, are there any capital that I didn't see any other than the one you pointed out that were above that will require board action?
No.
Just as a reminder to the public, our policy does permit overages under $5,000 and we clean those up at year end. So anything under 5, as long as there's money to pay for it, all year end. All right. Matt, I don't know if you have an update on the audit for Henry James.
No.
We have nothing from the state. All right. That's the story of this budget. Okay.
Am I correct that we heard that the audit was completed in December?
Around then, yeah, in the winter it was completed.
So they just need to review it and sign the check. Yeah. So, and they said it could be 2 weeks or whenever. It looks like we're in the whenever period. So that may be something to follow up with our state rep and state senator on to see if we can move that along, because that would be very helpful for next year to have those extra dollars. Okay. With that, I think we are now ready to go into budget discussion and possible action. I want to give members of our board an opportunity to speak generally about the budget process or any specific concerns they have.
Just a little perspective here. I mean, there's a lot of discussion tonight about this budget and the expenditure side, and that we wish it were lower. And I just prefer perspective. We spent months in this room for people who wanted to spend more. And I just want to say that we went through a really rigorous exercise. I'm looking at the first select woman back there. I'm looking at Jeffrey and the Board of Education. I mean, they came in with an awful lot of projects that didn't make it into this budget because of budget discipline. So, okay, I know it always happens at this meeting. I've been to this meeting 5 times now, and people come in and say, gosh, why is the budget so large? Well, we went through a period when we said, why aren't you spending my money? Which was equally painful on the other side. Somehow I just feel a need to get that off my chest to find a little bit of equilibrium here as we're about to consider what I think was a lot of hard work by these people who didn't get things that they wanted to, and we did things with the capital budget and other things in order to come out within the goal that we originally set. So I feel that added perspective is just necessary as we're about to approve something, and frankly, I think this board ought to be proud of.
Does anyone else like to make a comment?
I guess I would also speak up for the other boards because in previous years, we've had, the last 2 years were very difficult. And I felt that our work this year was easier than in the past 2 years because the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, and I sat through their meetings, I saw them agonizing over this, really worked hard to bring these costs down. So I endorse the work they did and we appreciate it.
Mike?
I think enough has been said.
Okay.
Just not everybody has said it.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing. I think Art sort of hit the nail on the head. The problem with municipal government is we are not a business. There is no profit margin. So everything we spend are on services that our community is either mandated to provide or we want to provide. And the majority goes to our education and then police and then roads. And then after that, everything else. Parks and Rec comes in there and library after that. But so the question is, what do we have to pay? There are some things we are mandated to pay, like debt service, don't have an option, legal obligation. Have to pay non-public schools, don't have an option, legal obligation. There are other mandates that we have to spend, don't have an option. We are bound by union negotiations and we want to treat our employees fairly, and we thank everyone, both staff and management, who works to come up with a fair number, but that's a legal obligation. And after that, it's really what do people want to spend their money on and what value are they getting for their money? They say, is this good value? What do I get for it? Well, we get, I think, Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong, about 2,400 acres of open space that you take care of, right? We get 7 schools, we get our roads plowed, we get the senior center, we get the library, we get support for the performing arts center, we get social services, we take care of our most needy. So those are the things we get for those dollars. The question is, I would say, if you think it's not worth the value, let us know what you wanna reduce, where you don't wanna spend money, because that's helpful to us as well. So I look at it as not just dollars and cents, although that is our job, but it's also the value proposition. What are we getting for those dollars, and is it worth it to us to pay that, to live in the community that we have? And that's what the voters will decide in referendum. And we do appreciate everyone whose comments give in there. We are also cognizant that affordability is becoming an issue. And we do have about 20% of our population that is under the ALICE limit, asset limited income constraint. So that means any increase is going to be hard on them, and we have to decide what kind of community do we want. Do we take care of the least among us? Or do we say thank you very much, move along? I hope, and I think everyone in this room believes we try and strike that balance so we take care of the least among us. Whether we're successful or not doing that, or doing it in the way that the public wants, they get to decide at referendum, so let us know. But throughout the year, if you have things you think we could do better, be more efficient, or where you don't want us to spend money, let us know. My number's out there publicly, and Amy knows if you need to get in touch with me, she can just give you my cell phone number. It's pretty accessible, but all of us are accessible by email, and everyone I know will take calls and speak to people directly. So please reach out. I'm happy to meet anyone for coffee, and I know other members in this room are willing to do so as well. All right, so with that, we are ready to take motions. We do have a series of motions. I did pass out, I see some more. You wanna see? No, okay. We did do bond resolutions. I don't know if anyone would like a copy, you didn't get one, but there are copies of bond resolutions on the front desk if anyone needs one. Would you like a copy of the bond resolutions?
I can put them up too. I can put them up on the screen.
Oh, that'd be great. They're very long and detailed, so we are going to, when we get to those, do a motion to waive the reading of them, which is why we're providing copies in advance. Although, we'll just confirm with my board, everyone has had an opportunity to read the documents, okay. So that is confirmed for the record. Alright, so I think there's no objection, we'll begin with motions. I have a motion effective April 22nd, 2025 to increase the Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund expenditure budget by 95,225 to reflect a transfer to the general fund, transfer out for the purposes of funding Memorial Day.
So moved.
Second.
This is just a clerical correction, this was always intended, so we're just cleaning up the budget so that it reflects the transfer out. It does not change any of the dollars or the spending that we had anticipated, is that correct? Correct. Okay. We have a motion, we have a second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, the motion carries unanimously. May I have a motion effective April 22nd, 2025 to amend the Board of Selectmen approved budget by reducing major medical insurance line item by $113,083 and authorize the use of health insurance reserves in the amount of $113,083 for net zero impact. The major medical insurance line is adjusted from $3,862,927 to $3,749.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Amy, we'll just review for the public why we're doing this. What we're doing is getting rid of, the initial proposal is to use 450 of general fund reserves. We will not be using that, and instead, we are going to be using health reserves. Those are specific reserves to offset the increase in health. Municipal budgeting, it is best practice to use specific reserves before you use general reserves, as we heard from Amy in the quarterly. We have more reserves in health than is required by a consultant. You're self-insured in health. The benefit of being self-insured means that when there is a savings or a reserve, we can use those for tax relief. If we're not self-insured, those we go into the profits of the provider. So this is being used in accordance with the recommendation of our health consultant. They're not using more than he has recommended and a third of that use, is that correct? Confirmed. Let the record reflect that the finance director has confirmed appropriate use of health reserves. Okay, anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. May I have a motion effective April 22nd, 2025 to reduce the Board of Education approved budget by $336,917 and authorize the use of health insurance reserves in the amount of $336,917 for net zero impact. The total budget is adjusted from $88,597,918 $88,261,001.
So moved.
Second.
And again, for discussion, this is not reducing the Board of Ed's ability to spend, it is just the pool from which they're taking from them. Instead of taking from the general fund, they're using some of the expenditures from the health fund. The way it translates, we have to make this motion, but it doesn't change the mill rate, it doesn't change taxes, and it doesn't change their spending or the provision of services. Is that correct? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. And I'm reaching the end of my voice, so Bert, if you could make a motion and read the next one, that would be helpful.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Selectmen annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 shall be approved and implemented in the amount of $29,624,001. Can I continue?
Yeah.
The Board of Finance projects anticipated revenues from all sources and appropriates planned expenditures for each department, board, office, or other agency of the municipality as presented in the attached line item budget summary attached to this document. Further, for the purpose of approving departmental supplemental appropriations in accordance with Town Charter Section 809, and transfers between departments in accordance with Town Charter Section 812F. Individual Board of Selectmen departments are defined in this document. I'm not going to read each line.
As portrayed in the document.
As portrayed in this document, yes, and that completes that motion.
Melissa, the line item is not attached to this, so can we just make sure they are attached to the minutes?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
It'll be posted.
They were attached in the document you sent, yes, they are attached, okay. Alright, we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. The reason why we define the departments is because we have to approve any spending that is over that amount. Within a department can be approved by the town manager on recommendation of the board of selectmen. Okay.
I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purpose of paying the expenses of the Board of Education annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $88,261,001.
Is there a second?
Second.
Alright, second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, the motion carries unanimously.
I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of non-public schools' annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $562,110.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mike? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the town's debt service annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $9,554,857.
Is there a second?
Second.
Alright. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purpose of paying the expenses of the Sewer Use Fund, also known as the Sewer Treatment Plant, annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $5,082,546.
Second that.
You can finish that motion.
Further, the Board of Finance anticipates revenues and planned expenditures from the Sewer Use Fund as presented in the budget summary that will be attached to the minutes of this meeting.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purpose of paying the expenses of the Parks and Recreation Special Revenue Fund annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $2,953,495. And further, that the Board of Finance anticipate revenues and planned expenditures from the Parks and Recreation Special Revenue Fund as presented in the budget summary attached to the minutes of this meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purpose of paying the expenses of the Residential Property Special Revenue Fund annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $53,850. And further, the Board of Finance anticipates revenues and planned expenditures from the Residential Property Special Revenue Fund as presented in the budget summary attached to the minutes of this meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Alright, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. These are not gonna be read.
I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriations and budgets in accordance with town policy, recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purpose of paying the expenses of the annual budgets for the following special revenue funds. That is, for the special revenue funds listed in the document that will be attached to the minutes of this meeting. For the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026, be approved and implemented in the amounts that will be listed in the minutes.
Shown below
Well, shown below
the motion.
in the motion.
We'll have the motion list them as well in the minutes, okay.
Okay, in the minutes, yes. Including $1,596 for the Clean Energy Task Force.
Pardon?
He's just reading the last one.
Just to give a flavor.
Okay. Okay,
Well, on that note, I'll second it.
all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the fiscal year 2025-2026 capital non-recurring projects be approved and implemented in the amount of $3,365,907, including the specific allocations added to this motion, which shall appear in the minutes of this meeting. Further move that all CNR projects be approved as individual project appropriations, capped in the amount listed for each project, and financed from the source listed for each project as attached to this motion in the minutes of this meeting. And I further move in accordance with town policy that for capital non-recurring projects only, CNR projects may exceed the individual project appropriation in the current fiscal year by $5,000 or 20% of the total project budget for each project, whichever is less, so long as the anticipated overages do not exceed anticipated savings from other CNR projects. In such instances, transfers will be approved at year-end close. In all other instances, expenditures above the approved project appropriation shall be approved in advance in accordance with the town charter.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. Are you getting tired? We wanna go to someone else?
I move that someone named Art read the next.
Which one? I move that effective April 22nd, 2025, that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses for the FY 2025-2026 Capital Improvement Plan projects be approved and implemented in the amount of $4,742,400. CIP projects are approved as individual project appropriations capped in the amount listed for each project and financed from the sources listed for each project as described in the resolutions and as recommended by the town's bond council.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Effective April 22nd, 2025, that the reading into the minutes of the full text of the resolutions set out is waived. Copies of the resolutions having been made available to those in attendance and recorded in these records immediately preceding these, and that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the projects as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
This refers to the capital bonding resolution.
The bonding resolutions that are up there, for members of the public, you were provided a copy. Melissa had copies up there if somebody wants to see them, they're right up here. And they will be attached to our minutes as well.
And now we get to the big one.
And I've confirmed for our clerk, we have confirmed that all members of the Board of Finance have had an opportunity to review those bonding resolutions. Okay.
Got a motion and a second.
We have a motion, we need a second.
We have a
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. We're now moving on to the referendum questions. Art Wallace.
Sure. Alright, so I move effective April 22nd, 2025, that in accordance with sections 406, automatic referendum, and 808, duties of the Board of Finance on the budget of the charter, the recommended operating budgets will be submitted to a referendum in the following forms. 1, shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Education and non-public schools annual budgets for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $88,823,111. Second.
Yeah, read them all.
Okay. Shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Selectmen annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $29,624,001. Shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Sewer Use Fund Sewer Treatment Plant, Residential Property Fund, and Parks and Recreation Special Revenue Fund annual budgets for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $8,089,891. And fourth and last, shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses for the capital non-recurring, and debt service annual budgets for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2026 be approved and implemented in the amount of $16,103,435.
Okay, a second.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And Amy, just to confirm, none of the capital projects rose to the level of a separate referendum question, is that correct? Okay. Does that conclude our budget? I wanna give a shout out to Melissa Appleby, who actually wrote this document. It is about a 60-page document once we attach all the alignments. So a lot of work just putting the document together, and also, of course, Amy for your work throughout.
Thank you.
Do you wanna recognize that? All right, so we now have a budget to go to referendum. When do we think the referendum will be?
Friday, May 9th. It's the same schedule as last year. That worked out really well for the registrars, holding it here in Town Hall on a Friday. It's all day, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. I think, so that's what we're shooting for.
And can you talk about how we're gonna get the word out that there is a referendum? What types of things will happen?
Sure. So we will do the traditional notice in the newspaper. We actually have to publish this entire document that's on the screen gets published as a full page ad in the Hartford Current. I'm sure everyone looks for that. We push it out through our website the same way we do with our normal communications, like we did with the public hearing. We'll do the sandwich boards around town, which we did for the hearing, and the budget mailer, which hopefully will be in people's mailboxes about a week beforehand. So that's it.
Anything else folks need for that? I assume you'll send it to the press as a press release as well. Okay. All right, whether they publish it or not, we don't know. All right, so we have that. Moving on to the town annual report, we have a draft of the town annual report. It was drafted by Franklin Bozo. So thank you to Franklin for getting this together. I think over the summer, it might be helpful to sort of take a deeper dive and take a look at what information we want in there in the form. I think, there are opportunities to make it a little more readable. So that may be something we may wanna do a subcommittee, or if there's somebody who wants to work on it, give some thought, because next meeting I'll recruit folks to help review that, anyone who has an interest in that. All right, I have a motion to approve the annual report and to request that the finance director post it.
So moved. Seconded.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously. And may I have a motion to adjourn? Wait, let me just check. Amy, is there anything I've forgotten?
No, you're
Okay.
Wow.
Go ahead. Make the motion.
I'm not gonna do it. We just don't wanna leave.
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Thank you, everyone.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town.
Bringing us together through local programming,
Education and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community.
Ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings.
And celebrating milestones.
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret,
People have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue.
Even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SEM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
For generations to come.
Visit our website
Or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
Counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media.
where your town
Your schools and
And your government
come together.